The Penguins kick off a weekend back-to-back against the best team in the National Hockey League. Can they find a way to get a win? Hunter and I are going to look into that and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
Your Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on all social medias at synonym for wet. Joined as always by my co-host, the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making this part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And if you're following us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as that notification button so you can be one of the first people to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we get started today, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. The Pittsburgh Penguins are back in action after 2 days off tonight at PPG Paints Arena, where they will welcome the NHL's hottest team so far, and that is the Winnipeg Jets. They currently hold one of the best records in the National Hockey League. They have lost all of 3 games in regulation, with 2 of them only coming within the last week. So this is going to be a monumental challenge for the Penguins when they take the ice tonight. The Jets are just, as I said, hotter than hot right now, and it is taking place with a lot of help up and down their lineup. Chief among them is Mark Scheifele. He's got 24 points. Right there with him is Kyle Connor with 24 himself. Both have identical stat lines with 12 goals and 12 assists, so they're not just lighting the lamp, they're helping one another out. But we will get more into the Winnipeg Jets a little bit later on. We got to start with our hometown team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we might as well just get it out of the way now. Between the pipes tonight is Tristan Jarry, and I'm going to have a take that Hunter might not expect here. I agree with this decision. I think that he played very well against Tampa in that loss in overtime. Yes, you can pin the overtime goal on him. Absolutely. It was a terrible goal to give up. He bid on a fake shot that didn't happen. And as I said in the recap episode, he slid all the way out to West Virginia, which left the net wide open for point to end the game. But in the lead up to that, he was extremely solid, especially when the Penguins went into a shell in the third period and for parts of the second period where Tampa was getting a lot of chances. So if nothing else, if we continue on this mindset of they are trying to rebuild this goalie, get him back up to what he once was, you have to give him this vote of confidence going into tonight's game and ask him, hey, you played a solid game against Tampa Bay. We need you to replicate that again tonight against Winnipeg. So go out there, do what you think you can do, and we will try to help you out more. But Hunter, your thoughts on this so far?
Well, Pat is right about one thing. I definitely did not expect that take out of him. I will respectfully disagree a little bit, which is, yeah, some people may think that's a bit rare for us, but hey, sometimes we do disagree with each other on the show. I disagree a little bit with you on that. I would have went to Nedeljkovic for this game because I feel like, I know Ned hasn't been, that good this year. He's definitely had his struggles as well, but I still trust him a bit more against a team like Winnipeg compared to Jarry, who has not had a good season. Yes, you are correct. He did play mostly well in regulation against the Lightning. He was keeping the Penguins in it with a lot of very good timely saves, something that he hasn't been able to do basically in any of his other previous starts. And then, of course, he negated all of that, with that terrible play in overtime bit on a fake that, as you said, and as I said as well, it wasn't there. But for this one, I feel like you got to give this to Nedeljkovic because you got to give Jarry the easier start in quotation marks on Saturday against a Utah team that's okay. I wouldn't say they're good. They had a nice start to the season. They won their first 3 games, but they've kind of fallen off a little bit. They're kind of in the playoff race, but they're kind of towards the bottom of the Central Division. Again, we'll preview that game a little later on in this episode, but I would prefer giving Jarry the easier start of these two compared to giving him the start against Winnipeg, basically throwing him to the Wolves against the league's best team this year and a team that is shooting very good this year and being like, okay, see what you can do about that. I could be dead wrong about this and he could go out there and have a very good performance. But again, I'm skeptical because he's been very bad this year. So if it were up to me, I would have given him the start against Utah, but hey, that's just why I'm not the head coach of a hockey team, people.
Yeah, I think I also don't want this to get misconstrued. This isn't me saying Tristan Jarry's back, leave your worries at the door. I still have a mountain of concern with Tristan Jarry. I am nowhere near convinced he has figured it out. But again, if you are working to bring him back and rebuild his confidence and get him to a level where he was about a year and a half ago, this is, again, part of that process. We have been talking about this with Tristan Jarry all season long, is that this is going to be a process to get him back to a better level, or at the very least, rebuild his value so you could possibly move him sometime in the next year. And this goes right along with it. You tell him, hey, we liked your game against Tampa Bay. We're going to put the saddle on you against the league's best team right now. And now the onus is on him to go out and have a similar performance. And this also gets you the answer that you might be looking for. It might not be the definitive one yet because we're still relatively early in the season. We're about the quarter point of the season. So at the very least, you're going to get some answers out of tonight's game. How does he respond after that overtime loss? How does he play in front of a team that is absolutely shooting the lights out? We were talking about this before we hit record. They have a couple of guys who are shooting above 20% right now. Is that sustainable? More likely than not, or more likely not than it is. But at this current moment, that is the way they're shooting the puck. So this is them trying to get some more answers out of Tristan Jarry to see where his game is, if this plan is working, and if they can trust him moving forward. Away from Tristan Jarry starting in net tonight, it was kind of a sort of well-attended morning skate with players like Cody Glass, Blake Lizotte, Evgeny Malkin, Puustinen, DOC amongst them. Chris Letang and Kevin Hayes, however, we kind of got our answer from Mike Sullivan about where they're at. It looks like they're going to return tonight. Mike Sullivan using his copyrighted and patented game time decision designation. So that pretty much tells me that they will be in tonight because Mike Sullivan usually gives guys who are returning the game time decision designation. So we should expect to see them tonight. However, we talked about this yesterday. I'm very curious to see which forward comes out tonight when they take the ice, because for all the flaws that came out of the Tampa Bay game, I liked a lot of what I saw from the forward group top to bottom. Was it great? No, but you saw some flashes there, and I think they're starting to figure something out with line combinations. So I'm very curious to see who Kevin Hayes gets slotted in for.
I know you don't want them to touch the OPP line with O'Connor, Puljujarvi, and Poulin, but I'm kind of curious if Mike Sullivan will kind of tinker with that, maybe take Sam Poulin out for Kevin Hayes, or maybe he takes someone off the fourth line. For example, does Matt Nieto get scratched tonight, even though I think it's more unlikely than it is likely that he gets scratched because he's been playing, I feel like, fine over the last week since he came back from all those injuries. It's just still something that's kind of in the back of my mind a little bit. If Hayes is ready to go, he's fully cleared, game time decision, I would expect him to play. It's just that someone's going to be coming out of the lineup that I'm sure fans are going to be pretty upset about. As for Letang, yeah, he was doing he was in his usual spot, at practice on Thursday, up there with Matt Grzelcyk. We've already discussed Matt Grzelcyk, why he shouldn't be in the lineup anymore. Obviously, the coaches aren't going to listen to us and all the fans and everyone else out there, but it looks like that's going to be the top pairing with Pettersson and Karlsson on the second pairing. And then it looks like Owen Pickering is still going to stay in the lineup, which is the right move. You want to see more from this player. You want to see what you have in him before he probably goes back to Wilkes-Barre at some point this season. I don't expect him to stay up here for the rest of the season. I mean, maybe he'll be called back up after some trades are made. For example, Marcus Pettersson, if you can somehow find a taker for Matt Grzelcyk, for example, that would work as well. Then you can bring Pickering up, because that's two guys off your left side. If they're both gone after the deadline, Pat, there's two spots to be filled there. And I would expect Pickering to probably fill one of them. And again, you just got to see what you have. He's had a really nice week here. Throw him out there to the Wolves against Winnipeg and see how he plays.
Yeah, you definitely want to see what he does against even better competition, because the early returns have been solid. So very curious to see how he plays against a team like Winnipeg. And we will jump into a little bit of the Winnipeg Jets, as well as what the Penguins will have to do tonight in order to beat one of the league's hottest teams coming into PPG Paints Arena. But we will do that when we come back. But first, we got to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Game Time. We know we are in the absolute best time of the year right now, with the NHL all the way back. The NBA is back. The NFL, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. We're getting close to the playoffs. And you know there is absolutely no substitute for those games than seeing them in person. And Game Time is your place to get tickets for all of those sporting events, as well as concerts, comedy, and more. You guys know my story about going to the Old Mellon Arena and buying tickets from a scalper for a row and a section and seats that did not exist. Really wish I would have had Game Time back in those days, but alas, I've got it now. And right now, Game Time is having an exclusive zone deal for the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. You go to the Game Time app to purchase tickets, and you can get 10% off bleacher seating and 20 to 25% off of home plate area seats. There are also so many great features on the Game Time app, including Game Time Picks. Their curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You've also got all-in pricing. That shows you the total of your ticket up front, so you're not hit with any of those annoying fees at checkout. Of course, there is the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of your purchase if you find a better deal. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, welcome back to the Friday edition. It's a feel-good Friday here on Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. And the Winnipeg Jets, man, this is a genuinely great hockey team to start the year. The Winnipeg Jets have just beaten just about everybody that has gotten in their way so far this year, including the Pittsburgh Penguins, which was one of their blown lead games. We have seen it. It keeps happening. And it happened in Winnipeg a few weeks ago. But as I talked about at the top of the show, they are led by Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor, 24 points each. Bringing up the rear is Nikolai Ehlers with 9 goals, 13 assists, and 22 points. Josh Morrissey, defenseman, is off to a great start with 2 goals, 17 assists, and 19 points. And of course, starting in net for them tonight, one of the best goaltenders on the planet, Connor Hellebuyck. He's got a record of 13-2 this year and a .923 save percentage to boot. So he himself is having a great year, along with 3 shutouts already. So this team can score, this team can defend, and then just the cherry on top, they've got one of the best goalies in the world. So to say this is a challenge for the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight would be putting it quite lightly.
Big time. And I remember the time when Connor Hellebuyck used to carry those corpses to a playoff spot. Not anymore. He does not have to play at, a 935, 940 level to carry Winnipeg to the playoffs. He's only 923 this season, but that's still very good. And to me, I think he's the favorite for the Vezina right now. He is playing on top of his game. At worst, I think he's the second best goaltender on the planet behind Igor Shesterkin, but you can make an argument that he is the best goaltender on the planet right now. He has been fantastic. You remember in that first matchup, the Penguins didn't even face Hellebuck in that game. They faced his backup, who is Eric Comrie, and he played fairly well in that game. He's only made 4 starts this season, 3-1, 909 save percentage, but you ran through the numbers with Hellebuck. 13 wins, 2.2 goals against average, 923 save percentage. He has been dynamite in net for the Jets. Another big thing for Winnipeg, we've discussed this a little bit, they are riding a very high shooting percentage right now as a team. And, you look at individually as well. Mark Scheifele, again, having a great year, 12 goals, 24 points in 19 games. He's shooting almost 30% this year. We all know that number is going to regress a little bit in the second half, but that is an outrageous start. Same thing with Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers. Both are shooting over 17%. Gabe Vilardi, he's about 19%. Vlad Nemestikov, he's at 22% this year in terms of the shooting percentage. A lot of players are having great years shooting-wise. And while, again, this is a great Winnipeg team, I just don't want to see that turn into a, kind of a mirage for a full season where, it regresses, because I do think it's going to regress a little bit because these numbers are crazy, but it may not be, a regression that goes way down like we've seen in, with past Winnipeg teams and all that. This is a team that's in it to win it. I think they're going to add at the deadline. And if you want to win this game, the first biggest key for me, you need to get traffic in front of Connor Hellebuck. I know it's very cliche to say, but when you have a goaltender who is on fire like this, you need to make his life hell. You need to put bodies in front of him. You need to make sure he's not seeing the puck. You need to just, again, this is a total Michael Bunting type game, maybe a Brian Rust type game with the way they cut to the net. You need those players playing at the top of their games. Sidney Crosby with how he plays down low, especially on the power play. You need to have him also making Hellebuck's life a bit hell as well. That's the biggest key for me. If you give him open shooting lanes, he's going to gobble those up like candy. Like it's so easy for him. You got to make him move. You got to make him work. If you don't do that, again, he's going to allow probably 1 or fewer goals.
You're absolutely right.
Not good, man.
And the other thing I want to add about how this team is riding both Connor Hellebuck being at a completely another level and this high shooting percentage, you dig into their 5-on-5 numbers and you pull up natural stats, look at 5-on-5. They're middle of the pack in shot attempts. They are just under 50%. And then when you look at their expected goals percentage, they're in the bottom of the league at 23rd. So again, under 50%. So this shows you that this is an extremely opportunistic team that is not only shooting really well with high shooting percentages, but they're not giving up goals because of Connor Hellebuck. So if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight, along with what you said about you got to make life difficult for Connor Hellebuck in front of the net, you got to take his eyes away, you got to make sure there's traffic, and you got to make sure he's uncomfortable, because if you don't do that, he is not going to be beat. On the other end of that, you really cannot play a fire wagon game against this team, because with how efficient they are with shooting, we saw this up in Winnipeg. They didn't give that. If you go back and watch that game, I don't think the Penguins played exactly poorly. Did they play great? Not particularly, but again, it was a game where Comrie made the saves he needed to make, and then Winnipeg took advantage of every single chance they got. So you have to spend time in Winnipeg's zone. You cannot give them extended looks in your end, because along with all of their sticks apparently being on fire like it's NBA Jam and you start catching fire, this is a team that will make you pay for mistakes. So you have to take advantage of the fact that they are shooting the lights out and getting saves. So you cannot give them that opportunity throughout the night.
Agreed. And you go back to that first game in Winnipeg, the Penguins were playing decently well through the first, I would say, close to half of that game. The first period, it was scoreless at the end of it. I thought the Penguins played okay. They then jump out to a 2-0 lead. They were taking it to Winnipeg for part of that second period. It was just all of their warts were exposed right after they went up 2-0. All of their bad plays in their own zone came back to bite them, and they kept giving chance after chance to the Jets. And you can't play fire wagon hockey with a team like that, who is especially finishing their chances at an insane level this year. That game was tied for a little bit in the third period. It was 3-3, but then even after that too, Winnipeg scored 3 unanswered goals to win that game 6-3. Not a good enough effort in their own zone. We all know that has to be cleaned up in this one also if they want to win. This is a very deep and balanced Winnipeg team. They have Scheifele and Connor on their first line. They have Ehlers on their second line with Perfetti. Vladimir Mestikov has been very good this year. You have Niederreiter and Adam Lowry on their third line. You have Morgan Barron and Iafallo on their fourth line. Morrissey is a very good number one defenseman. He's really blossomed these last couple of years. You have Neil Pionk, who's not bad on the second pairing. Hayden Fleury's on the third pairing. This is a very deep and balanced Winnipeg team that I expect to add at the deadline. Again, they are in it to win it, and they've shown that through these first 19 games. I think the way they go deep in the playoffs is getting the right matchup. You saw what happened last year when I think they got the wrong team at the wrong time, and Colorado really took advantage of Winnipeg in the playoffs. This year, they've improved their scoring. They're very good defensively, and they have Hellebuyck continuing to play at a high level. So again, the big keys for me, getting traffic in front of Hellebuyck, preventing all those odd man rushes, making sure your pinches aren't too aggressive, especially playing against a team that can finish their chances at will. And I want to see the Penguins' depth really shine in this game.
I'm right there with you. One other thing I will add is I think the Penguins have to emulate kind of what they did for the first 2 periods against Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
They were very efficient in their defensive zone. They did not give up the middle of the ice very easily. And if you find yourself in the same situation that you did tonight against Winnipeg that you were in against Tampa Bay, don't go into a shell. Just keep attacking. Keep playing a full 60. Don't white knuckle this until you get to the end and hope that you can come out with 2 clean points. When you have them down, keep them down. So that is going to be it for this second segment. When we come back, we're going to preview the Saturday night game against the Utah Hockey Club. But for now, Penguins Jets tonight, 7 o'clock, PPG Paints Arena. You can catch that on Sportsnet Pittsburgh if you are in town. If not, it is also going to be on NHL Network, so you can catch it there. And when we come back, we will get you set for the Saturday night matchup. The first time ever, the Pittsburgh Penguins will meet the Utah Hockey Club, and we will talk about that right after this. But first, we got to tell you about our last sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook betting partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back to the Friday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes, and kind of a history-making game coming up on Saturday night when the Utah Hockey Club comes to Pittsburgh. That will be the first time that the Penguins have met this iteration of this franchise that has moved to Utah from Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, wherever they have been over the past couple of decades. So really exciting to see that, because before we even get into the game itself, it's really exciting to see a young franchise with a lot of potential, a lot of good core pieces, now have an ownership that is dedicated to making this a successful team. Their ownership has basically said they are going to spare no expense, to the point that the Delta Center, where they play in Utah, has been made specifically for basketball, but they are retrofitting that thing as we speak to make it both a basketball and hockey arena. So really exciting to see that they're going to spend the money, put the effort in, and this is going to be a franchise that we are not going to forget about quickly. The novelty is not going to wear off after just one season, because there is a lot of talent both on this Utah hockey club and in their system. So they are going to be quite good right now and then moving forward, led right now by Clayton Keller, who's having himself a solid start to the season, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. And it's been not the best recent stretch for Utah. They, like you said, they started hot. They've trailed off a little bit as of late, but really cool, no pun intended, to see a Pittsburgh native, West Mifflin's own Logan Cooley. He's having a solid start to the year, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points in 19 games. So, Hunter, this is a young team that has a lot of talent. They're starting to figure it out. We're hoping they can figure it out throughout the year. They're battling in the Central Division. So what do the Penguins have to do against the hockey club to get a win on Saturday night?
I'm glad you finally called them the Utah Hockey Club and not whatever the heck you were calling them earlier this week. What was that you said?
The Fighting Utahns.
The Fighting Utahns. Maybe you can pitch their owner about a name for them. You can pitch.
We all know what they're going to be next year. It's more than likely going to be the Yeti. I would be stunned if it's anything else.
See, people thought this was a hot take. The Utah Venom is cool, man. Sorry, I just think that's so cool. Some people didn't like that name. Sorry.
I think you got to be a little more of a desert team to be the Venom, because you're thinking snake. When you're in the mountains with Utah and everything, Salt Lake City, I think you got to go Yeti.
Okay, I think that's fair. Yeah, I just feel like, Venom is also a cool name, but getting to the Utah Hockey Club, yes, 3-0 to start the year. They are also 4-1-1 through their first 6 games, but as of late, they've slipped a little bit in the standings. They're 7-9-3, 6 in the Central. They are still trying to fight their way into the playoff race. They have gotten some really good production from their young players here, but it's also nice to see this team, or these players, they have really stable ownership finally. They weren't getting any good ownership during their time in Arizona. Before that, it was, remember the Phoenix Coyotes? It was really poor with their ownership groups in Arizona. Now you have an owner in Utah who cares about winning. Did you see the money they spent this offseason? They were really serious about turning this team over a little bit and trying to get them to the playoffs. They kind of revamped their entire defensive group. They brought in Mikhail Sergachev from Tampa, which was nice. They brought in John Marino. He's a bit banged up right now. Sean Durzee's a bit banged up right now as well. But it was nice to see them make some pretty aggressive moves, something that I'm not usually used to seeing with that franchise, especially since they were in Arizona and the owner there was, let's face it, he was kind of cheap. But this year, Clayton Keller has played very well. 6 goals, 16 points in 19 games. Dylan Guenther's been very good. Nick Schmaltz, he has 13 points, but he hasn't scored in 19 games. I think that's coming sooner rather than later. You brought up Logan Cooley. I love watching him play when I can. Sergachev is almost at a point per game. They're getting some quality depth scoring. Jack McBain has 5 goals. Barron Hayton has 5 goals. Across the board, again, they're getting quality depth scoring. You look at their line, Schmaltz and Hayton are on that third line. Cooley and Krause are on that second line. Then you have Clayton Keller and former Penguin Nick Bukestad on the top line with Dylan Guenther defensively. Former Penguins Oli Mata and Ian Cole are in that lineup. So that'll be a nice little reunion for those 2 former Penguins. And then also Robert Bortuzzo has also been in the lineup this year too. So 3 former Penguins defensemen should be playing in this game on Saturday. And then goalie-wise, they have Karel Vejmelka, who I feel like has been a bit underrated throughout his career. He was putting up some decent numbers on some bad Arizona teams. So it's nice to see him at least getting more support for this team in Utah. But, it's a back-to-back at home. Got to keep your shift short. You don't want to exert, too much energy just because you're playing the night before. Alex Nedeljkovic is expected to get the start. But again, if you can slow down someone as hot as Keller, Cooley's been great. The Penguins will have a good shot of winning this game. I think the Penguins will, it's goalie wise, in terms of Vejmelka versus Nedeljkovic. Vejmelka has a .922 save percentage this year, only has 1 win though, 5 losses. So save percentage wise, he has the edge, but he just hasn't been able to get wins this year. Another big thing for Utah is that Connor Ingram is day-to-day right now. That's been a big injury because he's actually gotten most of the starts this year for Utah. Pat has 13 games, 6-4-3 overall, .871 save percentage. So not a good save percentage, but they're giving him more of the reps this season. compared to Vejmelka. But this is still going to be a really fun game, and I'm excited to see how these new look faces play for Utah against the Penguins for the first time. But, again, my keys, a little bit similar to the game against Winnipeg. I mean, it's kind of similar to a lot of the games that we've been talking about this year with their play in their own zone, the forward depth needs to shine, all that good stuff. So those are just a couple of my keys. But again, I feel like I'm saying these for almost every game at this point. I don't mean to ramble on for 5 more minutes.
The biggest thing for the Penguins on Saturday night, it really is, you hinted at it a little bit there, is that it's going to be the second half of the back-to-back. Yes, it's at home. You're not traveling. That makes it a little bit easier because you get to go home, sleep in your own bed, have your routine in place. You're not jumping on a flight or jumping on a bus and heading to the next city. That makes it a little bit easier. However, after you're playing the league's best team in Winnipeg on Friday night and then welcoming in Utah on Saturday, you have to play simple. It has to be everything simple, nothing complicated. Play your system the way it's supposed to be played. You get the puck in the neutral zone, dump it in deep, go get possession, shots at the net. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, especially when you're playing a team that's a little bit on the young side, a team that is struggling a little bit, just like you are. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just keep it simple. And like you said, Karel Vejmelka has just had some rotten luck, not getting a lot of run support, so to speak. He's making the saves, but he's not getting the support he needs from his team. So you have to just play a very solid, simple game against Utah, and I think you can come away with 2 points. This is also, these next 2 games, a really good measuring stick right now to really find out where this team is. Can you build upon some of the solid things you did against Tampa Bay, play a full 60? Can you get 3 of a possible 4 points, or at the very least 2 of a possible 4, and kind of come out of this a little bit better than you are going into it? So we will see what happens with that. Same exact kind of deal on Saturday night, 7 o'clock at PPG Paints Arena. You can catch the game on Sportsnet Pittsburgh. And we are going to close up this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Enjoy the games this weekend. Hunter and I will be back on Monday to recap both of them, as well as we always do on Monday. We will likely and hopefully welcome in our good friend Jesse Marshall for another Marshall Monday. But for now, thank you as always for tuning in to the Locked On Penguins podcast. For Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp, and we will be back in your podcast feeds on Monday.